Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're tackling Freudian psychology.
Oh, exciting.
Specifically, we're going to be looking at primary and secondary process thinking.
I like it.
Yeah, and you know how that kind of stuff affects how our minds work.
Yeah, cool.
And I think, the listeners might be surprised at how these concepts can, kind of explain things like their dreams or creative bursts or even how they deal with, stress and stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
So our mission, should we choose to accept it,
I think we should.
is to unpack Freud's ideas in a way that's clear and engaging,
Right.
but also make it, relevant to the listeners' everyday lives.
Yeah, make it real.
Okay, let's start with primary process thinking.
Okay.
This is like the wild child of your mind.
The wild child. I like that.
It's ruled by the id.
Right.
That part of us that just wants instant gratification.
Yep.
Doesn't really care about logic or reality.
Pleasure principle.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, think of it as like the unconscious part of you that's all about pleasure and just like avoiding pain at all costs.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a toddler, right?
Yeah.
Who wants what they want and they want it right now.
Right now.
No waiting.
No patience.
No patience.
Meltdown sitting.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets interesting, right?
Okay.
So primary process thinking has absolutely no concept of time.
Why?
It wants everything immediately.
Now.
Like right now.
Right.
And it thrives on like fantasy and symbols.
Okay.
It's like if you think about it, it's like a child
Hmm.
imagining a feast instead of waiting for dinner.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and it uses these like interesting mechanisms.
Yeah.
Like one is called condensation, where it like crams multiple wishes into one symbol.
Interesting.
So it's like a lot of information packed into one thing.
Huh.
And then there's displacement, which is kind of like shifting desires onto other things. Like, the classic example is, you're mad at your boss,
Yeah.
but you can't yell at your boss.
Right.
So you go home and you yell at your dog.
Or your goldfish.
Or your goldfish, yeah.
Yeah.
Poor goldfish.
Exactly.
But it's, it's just like in dreams.
Yeah.
Have you ever, fantasized about winning the lottery?
Of course.
To, like, escape work or something?
Who hasn't?
Right. That's, like, your primary process at work.
Interesting.
Offering you a temporary escape
A little fantasy.
from the drudgery of reality.
Yeah. I get it.
Okay, so that's primary process, the wild child.
The id. Running wild.
Now let's meet the voice of reason, shall we?
Okay.
We're talking about secondary process thinking.
Bring in the grown-ups.
Exactly. This is where the ego,
Steps in.
steps in, like a mediator, right?
The negotiator.
Yeah.
Between the id, who wants it all.
Right.
And the real world, which is like, no, not so fast.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is where things like logic,
Planning
Yeah.
and delayed gratification come into play.
oh, delayed gratification, the hardest part.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
And the ego's job is to make, rational decisions
Okay.
and navigate the constraints of reality, taking into account not just the id's desires, but also the superego's morals, right?
Right. The super ego, that's like the
The moral compass.
yeah, the moral compass. Like, should I do this? Should I not do this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like, while your primary process might be screaming, eat the whole pizza,
A whole pizza.
your secondary process thinking is like, hold on a second.
Maybe just one slice.
Let's finish studying first. Pizza can wait.
Yeah, the responsible one.
Responsible one, exactly.
right.
And that's a classic example of the ego at work, right?
Using long-term goals
Yeah.
over instant gratification.
Exactly. So,
Tough, but necessary.
well, it's fascinating, right?
Yeah. Because both primary and secondary processes are always active in our minds.
At the same time.
Yeah, they're constantly interacting. It's like,
Little dance,
yeah, a delicate balancing act.
back and forth.
And this mental dance plays out in so many ways,
Oh, yeah.
For instance, when we sleep, when we're dreaming,
Uh-huh.
the ego kind of takes a break
Time to rest.
and the id gets to run wild.
Party time.
That's why dreams can be so bizarre and illogical.
Yeah, no rules.
They're like a window into our unfiltered desires.
Makes sense.
But this interplay also fuels our creativity.
Oh, interesting.
Think about it. An artist channeling raw emotions, imagination,
Uh-huh.
that's primary process.
Okay.
Then they use their technique, their skills to express those ideas, to shape them.
Right.
That's secondary process stepping in.
So you need both.
You need both. It's the combination of both.
Make something beautiful.
That allows us to create art, music, inventions.
Anything creative, basically.
Exactly. And sometimes, though, sometimes the orchestra gets a bit out of tune, right?
Yeah. Things happen.
When we're stressed,
Oh, yeah. Stress.
our ego's defenses can weaken,
Makes sense.
and we might regress to primary process thinking.
Back to the wild child.
Back to the wild child, and that explains why we sometimes act impulsively
Oh, yeah.
or escape into fantasy.
When things get tough.
When things get tough, exactly.
Makes sense.
Like, think about it. Have you ever, craved comfort food when you're stressed out?
All the time.
Yeah, me too. That's your primary process, seeking solace.
A little comfort
Yeah, a little escape. And understanding this
can help.
can help you make healthier choices, even when your id is screaming for ice cream.
Ice cream.
So we've got these two processes, primary and secondary,
Dynamic duo.
constantly interacting within us, right?
Yeah.
But how does this play out in our day-to-day lives?
That's the real question.
Yeah, that's what we're going to get into.
Interested.
Let's delve into that a bit more, shall we?
Let's do it. All right, so let's talk about those defenses a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
Let's unveil the first member of our defense mechanism squad.
Oh.
Repression.
Repression. Okay.
Yeah, it's like having a mental junk drawer
Oh.
where we
okay.
shove all those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings,
Right.
memories we don't want to deal with,
Yeah. Make it
outside, out of mind,
and
right?
pretending that embarrassing childhood talent show never happened.
Precisely. Or maybe,
Right.
burying a painful memory deep down so you don't have to face the emotions.
Right.
It can, offer temporary relief.
Sure.
But those bury emotions,
Yeah.
they often find sneaky ways to resurface,
Oh, interesting.
sometimes influencing our behavior in ways we don't even realize.
So it's not exactly a healthy long-term strategy.
Not really, no.
Got it. What about denial? Isn't that similar?
Denial is another master of disguise.
Okay.
It's that stubborn voice inside us that refuses to acknowledge reality when it's just too difficult to accept.
Like when you insist your favorite band isn't breaking up,
Yes,
even though they've announced their farewell tour.
exactly. Or maybe downplaying the severity of a health issue
Right.
because facing the truth is just too frightening.
Yeah, it's easier to just pretend it's not happening.
Denial can be a powerful way to shield ourselves from painful emotions, but it prevents us from actually addressing the issue.
So denial's more like ignoring a problem and hoping it'll magically disappear.
It's a bit like putting a Band-Aid on a broken leg.
Okay.
It might cover up the problem temporarily,
Yeah.
but it won't actually heal the wound.
Right.
Now, let's move on to a defense mechanism that's a bit more sneaky.
Ooh, sneaky.
Projection.
Projection. Okay.
This is where we take our own unacceptable thoughts or feelings
Mm-hmm.
and attribute them to someone else.
Ooh, this sounds like a recipe for relationship drama.
It can be.
Give us an example.
Imagine feeling insecure about your own intelligence. Instead of acknowledging that insecurity, you might accuse someone else of being intellectually inferior.
So rather than owning up to those less than flattering feelings, we just project them outwards.
It's almost like a psychological sleight of hand.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Projection allows us to disown those uncomfortable feelings
Right.
and maintain a more favorable self-image.
I see.
However,
Oh.
it can also lead to misunderstandings and conflict.
Yeah, especially in close relationships.
Exactly.
Speaking of conflict, I think we've all experienced the not-so-fun effects of displacement.
Ah, yes, displacement.
Remember our poor goldfish who became the target of work-related stress?
This is when we redirect our emotions,
Yeah.
often anger or frustration,
Hmm.
from the true source to a safer, less threatening target.
So instead of confronting your boss about a stressful deadline...
You snap at your roommate for leaving a dish in the sink.
Exactly. Classic displacement.
It allows us to release those pent-up emotions
So sure.
without confronting the real issue,
Right.
which might be too intimidating or risky.
It's like emotional ping pong, bouncing those feelings off someone or something else entirely.
Precisely.
Well, I'm ready for a defense mechanism that's a bit more positive.
Oh, right.
Give us some good news.
We have sublimation,
Sublimation. Okay.
often considered a more mature and adaptive defense mechanism.
Okay.
It involves channeling those potentially unacceptable impulses
Uh-huh.
into socially acceptable, even productive activities.
So instead of acting on aggressive urges, you might channel that energy into a vigorous workout.
Precisely. Or perhaps you sublimate those feelings of frustration into creating art
Oh,
or
interesting.
composing music.
Okay.
Sublimation allows us to harness the energy of those primal drives
Right.
and transform them into something beautiful and beneficial.
It's like alchemy, turning base metal into gold.
It's a reminder that even our darker impulses can be sources of creative energy
Yeah.
and personal growth.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
What's fascinating is that all of these defense mechanisms,
Mhm.
from repression to sublimation,
Yeah.
they're working beneath the surface of our awareness,
It's like having a whole team of mental ninjas
protecting our ego.
from those psychic blows. But if these defense mechanisms are unconscious,
Right.
how can we even become aware of them?
That's the key. By understanding these processes,
Okay.
we can start to recognize our own patterns
Right.
and become more conscious of how we react in different situations.
So it's about shining a light on those hidden corners of our minds,
Exactly.
understanding the intricate ways our psyches work to protect us.
It's a fascinating journey
It is. It is.
of self-discovery.
So instead of being ruled by our unconscious defenses,
Right.
we can start to make more conscious choices.
About how we manage our emotions
Yeah.
and navigate challenges.
This is making me think about all those times I might have been projecting or displacing without even realizing it.
It happens to all of us.
It's a bit humbling, but also empowering.
Absolutely.
What about you?
Oh, I'm sure I've got my own defenses.
Are there any defense mechanisms that particularly resonate with you?
I think that's a great question to reflect on.
Yeah.
It might be helpful to think about recurring patterns in your relationships
Okay.
or your responses to stress.
Mm-hmm.
Do you notice yourself resorting to certain behaviors or thought patterns
Yeah.
when things get tough?
Yeah.
Recognizing these patterns
Yeah.
can be a valuable step.
Towards greater self-awareness.
Exactly.
And I imagine that increased awareness can lead to more fulfilling relationships.
I think so.
A deeper understanding of ourselves and those around us.
It's like having a new lens through which to view the world,
Yeah.
both internally and externally.
It's beautiful.
It allows us to see ourselves and others with greater compassion
Yeah.
and understanding.
This has been an incredible journey so far,
It has
exploring these different parts of the mind and how they interact.
lots of moving parts.
We've covered primary and secondary processes, those defense mechanisms, and so much more.
We have.
But before we wrap up our deep dive...
Yes. There's one more concept we need to address.
Ooh, okay.
A concept that often sparks curiosity and sometimes even controversy.
Uh-oh. What is it?
The Oedipus complex.
Ah, yes, the infamous Oedipus complex.
That's one of Freud's most talked about and often misunderstood ideas.
Definitely.
But it's actually a fascinating window into the complex dynamics
Of early childhood?
and family relationships.
Absolutely.
Are you ready to explore this next layer of the unconscious?
Let's unravel the mysteries.
Okay, so the Oedipus complex, right?
The Oedipus complex.
This is a big one.
It is a big one.
And I know it can be kind of controversial,
Yeah, for sure.
but it's important to approach it with an open mind.
Definitely.
And remember that, Freud was dealing with some pretty groundbreaking ideas
Oh, yeah. Way ahead of his time.
for his time, yeah.
Yeah.
So, stripping away all the sensationalism,
Right.
what's at the core of the Oedipus complex?
Well, I think it's really it's an exploration of those intense emotions.
That can arise in family dynamics.
Especially during childhood.
Yeah, those early years are so formative.
So let's break it down
Okay.
for our listeners.
Yeah.
The Oedipus complex, in its classic Freudian definition, refers to a young boy's
Okay.
unconscious desire for his mother
Uh-huh.
and a sense of rivalry with his father.
Like a little love triangle.
Yeah, exactly. A love triangle playing out in the child's psyche.
Interesting.
And for girls, there's a corresponding concept
oh, yeah.
called the Electra complex,
The Electra complex.
which involves a similar dynamic,
Right.
but with the roles reversed.
So the daughter is attracted to the father.
Exactly, and sees her mother as a competitor.
Makes sense.
Now, before anyone freaks out,
Don't panic.
it's important to remember
Yeah.
that these complexes are largely unconscious.
We're not talking about literal,
Yeah,
sexual
that-
desires.
In young children,
No, it's much more
we're
like
more about understanding how they develop their sense of self, their
Mhm.
understanding of gender roles, and their capacity for love and attachment
within the family.
within the family structure.
Yeah.
So think of it this way.
Okay.
The child, during these,
Formative years.
formative years, exactly.
Yeah.
They're navigating this, whirlwind of emotions.
It's a lot.
Love, desire, rivalry, even fear.
They're just trying to figure things out.
Yeah, they're trying to understand their place in the family.
Right.
And these complexes according to Freud, represent a normal stage in that developmental process.
As part of growing up?
So like the little boy experiencing these feelings of attachment to his mother might see his father as a rival.
For her affection.
Exactly. And the little girl, drawn to her father, might perceive her mother as like standing in her way.
It's all about those early bonds.
Yeah, and it's all part of the child's journey.
Of understanding relationships.
And their own identity.
Exactly.
As the child matures. Hopefully.
These complexes are usually resolved.
They work it out.
Through a process of identification.
Okay.
The boy starts to identify more with his father.
Right.
Seeing him as a role model instead of a threat.
Like, oh, that's how I'm supposed to be.
Exactly. And the girl does the same with her mother.
So it's a way of...
It's a way of resolving those inner conflicts.
Yeah.
And establishing a sense of belonging within the family.
Finding their place.
So it's less about literal desires.
Yeah.
And more about those early emotional bonds.
And how they shape us.
And how they shape our understanding of relationships as we grow up.
Exactly.
It's fascinating to think about, like, you know, how those early experiences might influence our patterns later on.
The ripple effects.
In how we relate to others.
It's amazing how much those early years matter.
It really is. And while the Oedipus and Electra complexes might not always play out, you know,
in such a textbook way.
In a textbook way. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Freud believed they touch upon these, like, universal psychological themes.
Oh, for sure.
That we all grapple with.
On some level.
To some degree, yeah.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing those primal emotions.
Love, rivalry, connection.
Exactly. And understanding how they can play out in our relationships.
Not just romantic ones.
Not just romantic, no.
All sorts of relations.
All kinds of interpersonal dynamics.
Yes.
Like, it's like, you know, seeing those threads of these early patterns.
In our friendships, our work.
In our friendships, our work relationships.
Even with authority figures.
It's a lens through which we can examine those deep-seated motivations.
It's like looking under the hood.
Yeah, exactly.
It's our own psyche.
So for our listeners out there.
Yeah, what can they take away from this?
Maybe it's about recognizing those Oedipal echoes in their own lives. Maybe it's about understanding why they're drawn to certain types of partners.
Or why they struggle in certain relationships.
It could be a chance to reflect on their own childhood experiences.
And how those might be shaping them now.
Yeah, and it's about becoming more conscious.
Of those unconscious forces.
That can sometimes sabotage our relationships.
Or lead us into those familiar but unhealthy patterns.
And ultimately, I think the goal is not to blame our parents.
Right.
Or get stuck in the past.
No.
But to use this knowledge
to make better choices now.
To make more conscious choices in our present relationships.
Exactly. It's about taking that knowledge and using it to create something better.
It's about understanding those unconscious scripts.
Those repeating patterns.
That no longer serve us.
Yeah, let go of those.
And creating healthier, more fulfilling connections.
It's about taking control.
Writing our own stories.
Informed by the past.
But not dictated by it.
Exactly.
That's a powerful thought to leave our listeners with.
I hope so.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Freudian psychology.
It's been a journey.
I hope you've gained some new insights.
Into your own mind.
Into the workings of your own mind?
Yeah.
And the complex dynamics that shape our relationships.
It's all connected.
It really is. And remember, the journey of self-discovery
never ends.
It's ongoing. The more we understand about ourselves,
the more power we have.
The more empowered we become to create the lives and relationships
that we really want.
That we truly desire. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating exploration.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the mysteries of the human mind.